To the best friends a man could ask for.
Cheers to that.
It was the summer of 2017, and I was scraping together money for my second year of college. My job was at the Iron Skillet, an upscale bistro-steakhouse that stayed open late. The work was monotonous grease, bleach, exhaustion, but the night pay made it worth it. Sunday nights were the worst. That was deep clean and full inventory night, when we scrubbed the place spotless and counted everything, sometimes until 4 a.m. That night, it was just 3 of us. Me, Lucas, the middle-aged, and Harper, the assistant manager, organized to a fault. By 1:30 a.m., we'd clean the main floor. Lucas leaned on the counter scrolling his phone while Harper barked out inventory orders. I grabbed the clipboard from under the counter, and that's when I noticed something small, but wrong. The metal lockbox that held the master keys was slightly open. The latch, usually clicked tight, was hanging loose. "Harper," I called out, trying to sound casual. "Did you open the lockbox?" She didn't even look up from counting rice bags. "No, why?" "The latch is undone." That got her attention. She frowned, closed it with a snap, and said, "It probably slipped. Those old boxes do that." Lucas just grunted, "Yeah, or maybe a ghost did it," without looking up. I tried to let it go, but that little open latch sat heavy in my chest. I knew I hadn't touched it. We moved into the basement dry storage room, a fluorescent lit, concrete maze under the kitchen. The air was thick with detergent and cold metal. That's when Harper froze mid-count, her eyes fixed on the small CCTV monitor showing the back hallway. "Did anyone see that?" she whispered. Lucas and I looked up. The camera feed showed the empty hallway, nothing moving. "See what?" Lucas sighed. The picture flickered, like static, but for a second, I thought I saw someone behind the water dispenser. Lucas rolled his eyes. "The system's ancient. It's probably dust." But Harper's face had gone pale. "No," she said quietly. "That wasn't a glitch. It adjusted exposure like it saw movement." She left to check the main control panel upstairs. 3 minutes later, she came back white as a sheet. "The alarm logs are clear," she said slowly. "But the system shows a manual override was entered 2 hours ago." We stared at her. "You did that, right?" I asked. She shook her head. "No one's supposed to override it except corporate or me. And I didn't." Before we could process that, Harper's gaze locked on the far side of the storage room on the heavy, steel, walk-in fridge door. The master lock that always hung open beside it was now fastened through the chain. And the spare key that was supposed to hang on the hook next to it? Gone. "We didn't lock that," Lucas said, his voice cracking. Harper's breathing hitched. "Then someone else did. And now, we're locked down here." The silence was broken by a sound that froze my blood. A faint drip. Drip, drip from the far corner, followed by a soft, wet sniffle. It was quiet, but close. Too close. Lucas's skepticism vanished. Harper stumbled backward, whispering, "The door upstairs. We need to go." We bolted toward the staircase. Harper fumbled with her key fob, the little green light blinking as the magnetic lock disengaged. Relief surged until she slammed her shoulder into the door. It didn't move. No, she muttered, pulling hard. "It's bolted. From the outside." "That's impossible," I said. "You can't bolt it from the outside. It's a non-locking handle." Lucas shoved it with his shoulder, metal screeching, but it wouldn't give. His voice was low, trembling. "Someone's barricaded it, like they knew we'd try this way." The realization hit all at once. We weren't just locked in. Someone had planned this. They were keeping us here. Then it came again, the sniffle. But this time, from the bottom of the stairs. We froze. None of us dared breathe. Harper's key fob blinked weakly in her shaking hand. "The service elevator," I whispered. "It's got a phone inside. We can call for help." We rushed toward the small steel door. Harper yanked at the handle. It wouldn't open. "The lever key," she gasped. "It's kept in the office. They took it." "They," Lucas repeated, barely a whisper. "Not it. They. We had nowhere to go but back. The basement was a dead end, a concrete tomb. I grabbed Lucas's sleeve and hissed, "The old cabinet in the back. The one with the decorations. We can hide." We ran through the aisles of stacked supplies, past the fridge, to the far end. The wooden cabinet smelled like old dust and Christmas lights, but it was big enough for the three of us to squeeze inside. We left the door cracked open for air. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, from somewhere near the fridge, we heard it shh, something being dragged slowly across the concrete. "The key," Harper breathed into my ear, trembling. "They're trying to unlock the walk-in." We clung to each other, hearts pounding. Then came the faint sound of metal on metal click, clack, followed by the jangle of the chain being dropped. Cold air rushed through the basement, carrying a strange, rotten smell like sulfur and raw meat. I peeked through the crack. The reflection on the polished floor showed a pair of heavy black boots, unmoving, facing the open fridge. The figure wore gloves, placing something small and white onto a shelf inside. Then they turned slowly. I pulled back, holding my breath. Footsteps moved across the floor, steady, deliberate. A faint zip echoed the sound of a bag being closed. The dripping stopped. After a moment, the boots turned again, walking toward the stairs. We heard the chain being refastened, the lock snapping shut, and then silence. For minutes, none of us moved. Finally, Lucas opened the cabinet. "Did they leave?" Harper whispered. "I don't know," I said. But they locked the fridge again. We crept toward the door. The lock gleamed under the flickering light. Then I saw something small on the floor, something shiny. I picked it up. The spare key. It was ice cold. Tied to it, with a thin red ribbon, was a laminated photo card of me. My high school graduation photo. On the back, written in neat black ink, were the words, "I just needed to make sure you were home safe, Oliver. I'll see you soon." Harper's hand was shaking as she reached for the key. Her voice cracked when she spoke. That's your photo, Oliver." Lucas stepped closer but didn't touch it. His face had drained of color. "What the hell does that mean?" he muttered. The three of us stood there, surrounded by humming freezers and the low buzz of the overhead lights. The key was still cold in my palm, and the ribbon, a deep, clean crimson, looked freshly tied. The photo was unmistakably mine, taken 2 years earlier at my high school graduation. It wasn't stolen from the restaurant. It had come from my home, and someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to deliver it. Harper backed away, whispering, "We need to get out. Now." She grabbed her radio, pressed the call button, nothing but static. Lucas swore under his breath. The signal didn't reach through the basement's concrete. "The front entrance," he said. "It's probably not locked the same way. We go through the main dining room, trip the alarm, and let the cops deal with it." We moved carefully through the storage room, every creak of the floor sounding like thunder in my ears. The walk-in fridge loomed to our left, the lock resecured, mocking us. The air felt heavier, colder. When we reached the stairs, Harper led the way up, the beam from her phone flashlight shaking across the walls. The hallway at the top looked empty, silent, except for the faint hiss of the air conditioning. The green light on the keypad by the door flickered, meaning the main system was still armed. If we opened that door, the alarm would scream through the building, and maybe that was the best thing that could happen. Harper pressed the emergency key code. The alarm chirped once and the panel light turned red. "That should alert dispatch," she whispered. We stepped into the dining room. The familiar smell of old grease and cleaning fluid hit me like a memory, comforting and disgusting at the same time. The chairs were still stacked on the tables, glinting faintly under the exit signs. We were halfway across the room when Lucas suddenly stopped. "You guys hear that?" We froze. There it was again, a soft, rhythmic sound echoing faintly from the kitchen. Thud, drag. Thud, drag. It was like someone was walking, but unevenly, one step heavier than the other. The sound came closer, stopping right behind the swinging kitchen door. None of us spoke. Harper mouthed, "Go." Lucas pushed open the front double doors, the alarm exploding into an ear-splitting wail. The outside night air hit us like salvation. We sprinted across the empty parking lot, straight to Harper's car. She fumbled with the keys, hands trembling so badly she dropped them twice before the locks finally clicked open. We piled inside. The alarm was still blaring behind us, echoing through the empty street. Harper slammed the gear shift, tires squealing as we sped out of the lot. It took nearly 10 minutes before we saw the flashing red and blue lights behind us. The police were already responding to the alarm. We pulled over, shaking and wild-eyed, as two cruisers roared past toward the restaurant. They found the barricade on the upstairs door, an old iron pipe wedged through the handles, custom cut to fit perfectly. The intruder had disabled the rear hallway camera just after the flicker Harper saw. They'd used a master-level alarm bypass, the kind only a security technician or manager should have access to. There was no sign of forced entry. Every door was still locked. Every code log showed only our entries. Whoever it was had gotten in hours before we arrived, and waited. The police swept the basement. The chain on the walk-in fridge was back in place, just as we'd seen it. Inside, on one of the lower metal shelves, sat a small, perfectly peeled orange. Nothing else. They bagged it for evidence, but it led nowhere. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. When the officers checked the CCTV recordings, the footage only raised more questions. Around 10:45 p.m., about 2 hours before our shift started, a figure appeared on camera in the kitchen. Dressed in black work overalls, face hidden by a ski mask, moving with absolute confidence, like they knew the layout perfectly. They walked straight to the control panel, entered a code, and disabled the hallway feed. Then, for 2 hours, nothing. Not a single camera picked them up again, even though no exits had been triggered. The photo that had been tied to the key was even worse. The back of it bore a faint water lucas, one that only appeared on prints made by a local photo shop near my college campus, a place I'd used dozens of times. Whoever this was, they hadn't chosen me at random. They knew who I was, where I lived, and what shifts I worked. I moved out of my parents' house the next week. I couldn't sleep without checking every lock twice, sometimes 3 times. The police kept the photo, the ribbon, and the key, but they didn't find any suspect. They said it might have been a personal fixation, maybe a disgruntled customer or a coworker, but that explanation didn't comfort me. Harper quit the Iron Skillet within a month. Lucas lasted another week after that, before disappearing off the schedule for good. The restaurant closed the following year after a fire in the storage area, unrelated, supposedly. Me? I changed my major, my number, my routines. I stopped using that Photoshop. But even years later, sometimes I still wake up at night to the faint sound of dripping slow, deliberate in the dark corner of my room. And I can't shake the thought that they weren't trying to hurt me that night. They were practicing, watching, planning, making sure I was still easy to find. The Pantheon was a temple of pretension, all hushed marble floors, mahogany panels, and the suffocating silence of people paying too much to eat tiny portions. I got a job there in the fall of 2019, fresh out of a fast food gig, and the learning curve felt like climbing a cliff face in a tuxedo. It wasn't the head chef's temper that scared you. It was the absolute iron-willed perfection of the routine. Everything had a place, and every rule was a commandment. One of the first commandments I learned about was Table 17. It was tucked away in a corner near the infrequently used emergency exit, the absolute worst spot in the entire dining room, dark, drafty, and isolated. Yet, it was, without fail, the most flawlessly set table in the entire restaurant for every single service, from the Monday lunch seating to the Saturday night rush. It was a full setting, heavy silverware arranged with unnerving precision, a perfectly folded white linen napkin, and a spotless crystal water glass. The centerpiece was always the same, a single, impeccably fresh white rose, clipped so the stem was the exact height of the wine carafe. And next to the rose, standing sentinel in a small, ornate silver holder, was a stiff, cream-colored card that simply read, "Reserved, Mr. R." No one ever sat at table 17. Don't touch it. Don't look at it too long. And definitely don't talk about it, was the mantra handed down by Marcus, the veteran server whose cynicism was as much a part of the Pantheon's atmosphere as the lingering scent of truffle oil. Marcus had been there 7 years. He was tired, perpetually irritated, and believed every customer was secretly an idiot. He was my designated skeptic. I asked him once, during a slow cleanup, why the table was never used. "It's the owner's thing, kid," he mumbled, wiping down the edge of the bar with aggressive focus. "Mr. Volkov is eccentric. He pays for the space. He pays for the setting. It's his silent partner, his muse. Or maybe he's just crazy. Just keep your hands off the linen. Elena, the cool, collected maitre d', a woman whose demeanor suggested she had never once felt a human emotion, was the enforcer of the rule. She was our calm thinker. If a busser accidentally snagged a chair near 17, Elena would materialize silently and offer a stare that could turn milk sour. To her, table 17 was simply policy, and policy was immutable. For 3 months, I treated table 17 like a dangerous artifact in a museum. I gave it a wide berth, cleaned all the surrounding tables first, and tried not to let my eyes linger on the single white rose. Then came a quiet Tuesday night. It was 11:15 p.m., and the last party had finally staggered out. It was just me, Marcus cleaning the espresso machine, and Elena cashing out in the office. I was doing my final check of the room, straightening napkins and collecting stray crumbs. I reached the corner of the dining room and approached table 17. It was perfect. I was about to turn away when something caught my eye on the pristine white tablecloth. Right next to the silver holder containing the Mr. R card, there was a single, small, brown object. I leaned closer, curious. It was a freshly peeled walnut shell, not a shard, but one half of the perfectly cracked, empty shell. It looked out of place, a piece of rural chaos on an altar of urban sophistication. My stomach twisted with that initial jolt of uncertainty. Walnuts were not on our menu. We didn't even have any nuts stored on the main floor. The only person allowed to handle the table was Elena, and she was obsessive about cleanliness. I quickly picked it up, wrapping it in my own clean napkin, and hurried over to Marcus. "Marcus, look at this," I whispered, showing him the shell. "I just found this on table 17, a walnut. We don't serve walnuts." Marcus glanced at it, scoffed, and then went back to polishing the steel of the espresso machine. "It's a shell, Alex. A busser dropped it. A diner carried it in. A mouse dragged it up from the street. Throw it out." "But table 17 is never touched," I insisted. "And it's a fresh shell. It wasn't there 10 minutes ago." He finally looked at me, a hint of genuine fatigue replacing his usual skepticism. "Listen to me, kid. The Pantheon is old. Weird things happen here. Just dispose of it and forget it. If Elena finds out you're messing with 17, she'll make your life a living hell, and I won't cover for you." I threw the shell away, but I couldn't shake the feeling. This wasn't a mouse or a busser. It was too deliberate, too focused. The shell was placed right next to the reservation card, almost like a calling card. The next night, Wednesday, I made a point of checking table 17 the moment I clocked in. It was immaculate, no shell. Thursday was a dinner service from hell. I didn't get near the table until well after midnight. I grabbed a cloth, intending to just sweep up any crumbs near the table, keeping my distance. As I did, my eyes fell on the reserved card. The silver frame was slightly askew. I gently adjusted it. The cream-colored card was still there, but something else had been added. Someone had taken a black ballpoint pen and very deliberately underlined the name Mr. R. The ink was dark, fresh, and slightly smeared, as if done in a hurry. And on the corner of the pristine, folded linen napkin, written small but undeniable, was a single, jagged number, 7. I felt a genuine spike of fear then, a cold flash of adrenaline. This wasn't a misplaced item. This was a violation. Someone wasn't just touching the table, they were marking it. They were leaving a message. But the question was, who was the message for? Was it for Mr. R, or was it for the rest of us? I didn't tell Marcus this time. His skepticism would just make me feel foolish, and Elena's reaction would be disciplinary. I knew, with the gut certainty of a person in a shared, private space, that something deeply unsettling was happening, and it centered on table 17. That night, before I left, I made a small alteration. I took a piece of my own small, clear plastic tape, and using a tiny snippet, fixed the reservation card to the silver holder. It was barely visible, but if anyone touched the card or tried to remove it, the tape would tear. It was my psychological tripwire. Friday was a complete blur of business. The restaurant was slammed. I only managed a quick glance at table 17 between rushes. The linen was slightly rumpled. A customer's coat had brushed it, but the card was firmly taped in place. No new marks, no new nuts. I started to relax, telling myself I was being paranoid, that the 7 was probably an old inventory mark I hadn't noticed. Then came the weekend. Saturday night. The busiest night of the week. We were nearing the end of the evening, and the atmosphere was one of controlled exhaustion. At about 10:45 p.m., a party of 6, a noisy, boisterous group celebrating a birthday, was seated at table 18, right next to the reserved table 17. I was their main server. They were messy, demanding, and they were talking about everything at the top of their lungs. The area suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a crowded, exposed arena. I was leaning over table 18, taking a dessert order, when the birthday boy, a loud man named Gary, pointed a sausage finger at table 17. "Hey, what's with the table right there?" Gary slurred, gesturing with his fork. "Looks perfect. Why is no one sitting there? It's wasted space." I gave the usual practiced, polite lie. "It's a permanent reservation, sir. A private arrangement with the owner." Gary laughed. "That's rich. Imagine paying for a table you never sit at. Talk about money to burn." His wife, a slightly more composed woman, reached out and touched the single white rose. "It's a beautiful rose, though. So fresh." And, suddenly, the hair stood up on my arms. The rose. The rule was that the white rose was replaced every morning by the flower delivery service, and the old one was disposed of before the morning prep shift. But as the woman touched the rose, I saw it clearly. The rose on table 17 was not the same one from the morning. This rose was a much deeper, richer red, the color of old, dried blood. And the length of the stem was slightly different, shorter than the specified height of the wine carafe. My blood ran cold. The flower delivery had been at 8 a.m. If someone had replaced the rose, they had done it during the last few hours, while the restaurant was full. My mind raced. The pantry? The emergency exit? I looked around, my gaze locking on the back corner. No one seemed out of place. I excused myself from the table and went straight to Elena. She was talking to the head chef at the pass. I cut her off mid-sentence, ignoring the deadly calm of her expression. "Elena, you have to look at table 17 now," I whispered urgently. "The rose. It's red. And the card I taped it this morning. Look." Elena's face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed, focusing. This was the overreactor moment. The sudden, sharp, almost violent change in composure. She walked, with a controlled, predatory grace, straight to table 17. She bent over the table. She saw the red rose. Her hand went to the reservation card. She didn't touch it. She looked at the tape, the thin, clear sliver that was still intact, holding the card in place. She looked around the room, and her eyes suddenly widened, not with panic, but with a cold, clear terror. She saw something I couldn't see. "Alex, call the owner," she ordered, her voice completely stripped of its usual composure, raw and trembling. Tell him to come now. Do not hang up." She turned back to the table and, very deliberately, she touched the linen napkin, the one marked with the jagged 7 I had seen 2 nights ago. She unfolded it. It wasn't the small square folded linen it should have been. It was a single, long, rectangular piece, folded over itself multiple times. When she fully opened it, it wasn't the clean, white underside of the napkin. It was a thick layer of a dark, crystalline powder that immediately spilled out, dusting the mahogany table and the pristine white linen. The powder was fine, dark, and smelled acrid and metallic. It was impossible to identify, but the smell instantly made my throat tighten. And in the center of the napkin, replacing the number 7, was a new, horrifying message, written in the same jagged, black script. "He won't need this anymore. The 7 is gone. Only the R remains." As I stared at the dark powder, the red rose, and the terrifying message, Elena let out a sharp, choked gasp, looking not at the table, but at the floor beneath table 17. I followed her gaze. Tucked neatly under the leg of the chair, resting right against the baseboard, was a pair of old, beaten-up leather gloves. The leather was thick and dark, and I instantly recognized them. They were identical to the gloves the person had been wearing in the dry storage room of the Iron Skillet years ago. It wasn't just a sick game anymore. It was a pattern. The obsessive precision, the targeting of a space, a locked room, a reserved table, the coded message, and the dark psychological need to leave a gift in a place of perceived safety. The terror was that he hadn't just changed the flower and left a note. He had been here, in the dining room, moving around the crowded floor, unnoticed. Suddenly, Gary, the loud man from table 18, shouted across the room, cutting through the silence. "Hey, did you see that guy?" he yelled. "The one in the black jacket? He just walked right out the emergency exit without even touching the handle. It was like he just drifted through it." My blood ran cold for the final time. The emergency exit, right next to table 17, was locked and armed. The alarm should have screamed. It didn't. I looked back at the table. The reservation card, taped down, was slightly lifted at the corner. The tape was still intact on the silver holder, but the card itself had been replaced with a completely new one, also reading Mr. R. The original card, with my tape, and the mysterious underlining, and the number 7, was gone. The police arrived. The owner, a thin, frantic man, simply stared at the table and whispered one name: Robert. He's back. The dark powder, it turned out, was extremely fine, desiccated animal blood. The identity of Mr. R was never confirmed for me, but Marcus, the skeptic, finally spoke up after the police left. He looked at me, his face pale and ancient. "You said you saw a number 7 before," he whispered. "There were 7 waiters who worked here when I started. Robert was the 7th. He was obsessed with the owner, Mr. Volkov, after Volkov fired him for a petty theft charge. He swore he'd reserved the 7th table permanently. He vanished about 5 years ago. I quit that night." The Pantheon was no longer a beautiful, pretentious restaurant. It was a stage that a methodical, psychological predator was using to perform his own personal, escalating horror show. He didn't just want to scare us, he wanted to show us his absolute control over our sense of safety and reality. And the reason the fear persists? I never found out if I was the target, or just the witness. I never found out why. In a place obsessed with perfect order, he allowed a single, messy walnut shell to remain on the most perfect table. Was it a signature or a challenge? I just know that now, every time I'm in a crowded space, I check the emergency exits, and I look for the most isolated, most reserved corner. Because that's where the most dangerous things always happen. The Starlight Diner was the kind of place that time forgot. It was all chrome and red vinyl, open 24/7, located just off the highway, a perfect stopover for truckers and shift workers. I worked the graveyard shift 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. starting in the winter of 2021. The clientele was sparse, mostly solitary figures sitting in the lonely glow of the neon, nursing a coffee in their regrets. My coworkers were Maya, the cook, a tough, older woman who was the ultimate calm thinker and could fry an egg while simultaneously solving a crossword, and Kevin, the other server, a college kid prone to hysterics, who was our designated overreactor. Kevin was always convinced we were about to be robbed or abducted. One night, about a month into the shift, I noticed the addition. It wasn't a structural change, but a new policy. The owner, a quiet man named Mr. Chen, had installed a small wooden suggestion box right next to the cash register. It was old-fashioned, made of dark, heavy oak, with a small brass lock and a slot wide enough for a folded napkin. "It's for customer feedback," Mr. Chen explained in his soft, accented English. "Help us improve. Please encourage people to use it." Kevin, predictably, hated it. "It's a target for robbers. A locked box of cash, probably. It's like putting a sign up that says, 'Break me.'" Maya just shrugged. "It's a box. It'll be full of complaints about the coffee and the country music. Don't worry about it." But the box did attract a specific, strange kind of attention. People used it. They didn't write notes about the food. They wrote confessions. The first one was found by Maya when she opened the box a week later. She'd laughed and passed it to me. It was on a grease-stained napkin, written in frantic, looping handwriting. "I'm sorry, I stole the tip jar from the bowling alley last night. I needed the cash. I know I'm going to hell. Please pray for me." We all had a laugh. Kevin thought it was hilarious. A midnight confessional booth, Starlight Diner, where guilt gets served. But the notes continued, and they got darker. The second note, found a few days later. "I see them everywhere. They look exactly like the people I killed. I can't sleep. I'm waiting for the sirens." The third note, "I let the fire happen. The insurance money was worth it. I just can't look my daughter in the eye anymore. I'm a monster." The notes weren't anonymous rants. They were raw, personal admissions of deep, soul-destroying guilt. It was the anonymity of the late-night diner, the dim lighting, and the absolute solitude that seemed to be drawing these dark secrets out of people. I found myself becoming obsessed, reading each note with a growing sense of dread and curiosity. I started seeing every single person who walked in the lonely trucker, the anxious-looking student, the quiet, older man nursing an endless cup of coffee as a potential murderer, arsonist, or thief. The anonymity of the place had been replaced by a pervasive, suffocating uncertainty. Who was I serving? About 2 weeks after the box was installed, it happened. It was 3:45 a.m. The diner was completely empty, which was rare. Maya was in the back prepping bacon for the morning rush, and Kevin was dozing in a booth near the windows. I was polishing the already spotless countertop. The front door opened, and a man walked in. He was unremarkable, mid-40s, wearing a clean but generic windbreaker and dark jeans. He wasn't a trucker, not a local, and not a shift worker. He looked like he had stepped off a suburban street, but at 3:45 a.m., he sat immediately in the last booth on the far wall, booth 9. It was the darkest booth, tucked away from the main counter and the windows. I went over, grabbed my notepad, and gave him the standard, tired greeting. "Welcome to the Starlight. What can I get for you?" He looked up at me, and his eyes were the first thing that struck me. They were completely devoid of color, an unsettling, pale shade of blue, and they looked utterly exhausted, like they hadn't blinked in days. "Just coffee," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, like he hadn't used it in a while. "And a piece of that pecan pie you have under the dome." I brought him the coffee and the pie. He didn't touch either. He just sat there, staring at the small, half-full mug and the slice of pie, completely motionless. I went back to the counter, but I couldn't stop looking at him. His stillness was unnatural. It was the kind of stillness that suggests a person is holding their entire body together by force of will. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He hadn't so much as sipped the coffee. Finally, he lifted his head and looked directly at the suggestion box by the register. He pulled a thick, tightly folded piece of paper out of his windbreaker pocket. He looked at it for a long, slow moment, his pale eyes fixed on the paper, his mouth a thin, rigid line. Then he stood up. He walked past my counter, his eyes never leaving the suggestion box. He stopped directly in front of it. He reached up, and slowly, deliberately, he unfolded the paper. It was not a small napkin. It was a full 8x11 sheet, folded over itself many times. He didn't put it in the slot. Instead, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver key. He inserted the key into the small brass lock on the box. It fit perfectly. He unlocked the box, and with a soft click, the hinged lid popped open. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't a customer. This was the keeper of the confessions. He was the one collecting the raw secrets, the sins of the lonely night travelers. The psychological horror of the realization made my skin crawl. The box wasn't for Mr. Chen. It was for him. He opened the box, slowly, carefully, and then he looked directly at me. His pale eyes were completely flat, emotionless, and terrifyingly cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was the witness to a ritual I was not supposed to see. He then took his full 8x11 piece of paper, and without reading it, without a moment of hesitation, he dropped it into the slot. The paper was too big, and it crumpled as it went in. He didn't lock the box again. He simply closed the lid, removed the key, and put it back in his pocket. He then turned around, walked straight to the front door, and left. His coffee and pie completely untouched. He was gone. The door swung shut, and the silence that followed felt like a physical pressure. Kevin, who had been woken up by the door swinging, shuffled over to me. What was that all about? He didn't pay for the pie. I could only point a trembling finger at the suggestion box. He had the key, Kevin. He unlocked it. Kevin, for once, didn't overreact with a scream. His face was a mask of shock and sudden, true fear. He had the key? Only Mr. Chen has the key, and he never gives it up. We walked to the box. I reached out and lifted the heavy oak lid. Inside, on top of the pile of crumpled napkins with their miserable confessions, was the crisp, white, crumped 8x11 sheet of paper. I didn't need to read it to know what was on it, but I did. Slowly, I unfolded the paper, my hands shaking so violently I nearly tore the clean white sheet. The entire page was covered in the same low, gravelly handwriting from the man's speech, scrawled from margin to margin, single-spaced in an agonizingly precise font. It was a meticulously detailed account of every terrible thing he had ever done, a lifetime of secrets laid bare for the dark. And at the very end, in the bottom right corner, was the signature. Not a name, but a simple, terrifying instruction. "I'm full now. Come and collect. You have 7 minutes." I didn't wait. I turned the key, and my eyes locked on the reflection in the diner's front window. A truck was pulling up to the curb. It was a massive, beat-up, dark blue 18-wheeler, but it was idling silently, its lights off. And in the passenger side of the cab, sitting perfectly still, was a man. He was wearing a black jacket and dark jeans, and his face was completely obscured by the reflection, but the outline was right. And as I stared, the passenger door slowly, silently opened. The man inside did not move, but the door was now ajar, an invitation. Maya burst from the kitchen, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What's going on? Where is that pie guy?" "We're leaving," I whispered, grabbing Kevin's arm. "We are leaving now." We locked the doors and scrambled out the back, leaving the lights on, the coffee brewing, and the suggestion box wide open on the counter. We drove away, watching in the rearview mirror until the diner was a tiny, lonely speck of neon on the horizon. Mr. Chen, the owner, called me the next day. The diner was fine, nothing was missing. The truck was gone. The suggestion box was locked, and the key was in its usual hiding spot in the back office. The 8x11 paper was gone. He sounded calm, almost indifferent, but he said something that terrified me far more than the man in the booth. "Alex, I understand you were scared, but I want to be clear about something," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The suggestion box is new, yes, but the lock is custom. I lost the only key years ago. It's been locked shut since the day I bought the diner." He had only put the box out as a psychological experiment, a way to make people think they could confess. The reality was, it was an unbreakable, unopenable prop. The man in the booth did not have a key. The man in the booth had a replica of an antique lock key, and he didn't just unlock the box. He broke the old, rusted, custom lock, and then replaced it perfectly when he left. He had planned this night for months, knowing exactly how to dismantle our reality. The sheer, terrifying meticulousness of the action, the hours spent crafting a key to a useless box, the patience to sit untouched for 20 minutes, and the final, cold-blooded signature that confirmed he was waiting for a collection broke me. I never went back to the Starlight. I check every lock and deadbolt at least 5 times a night, convinced that somewhere, a quiet man with pale eyes is meticulously crafting a key to my apartment, waiting for the perfect moment to slip his confession onto my counter. Because if he could unlock an antique lock that had been sealed for years, he can certainly open mine. And I still don't know who collects the sins from the Starlight Diner, but I know they are real, and they are out there, driving silently through the night.